It's a pleasure seeing so many of you here without a mask on, which is a really neat thing. And I'm super excited that I see a lot of employees or former employees of DOTD. Some I may or may not know, so I always like to find out. Any former employees, just wave your hand. I see a few. There's a couple. All right. Fantastic. It's great to be with you today. I'm going to spend about 19 minutes, and I'm going to set my alarm so I can take a few fireball questions at the end of my presentation. So I'm going to get that started. One of the things I talked about the last time I was here at Rotary was this wonderful project called widening I-10. It's one of the most congested corridors, as you know, in the entire country, from Florida all the way to the West Coast in California where it begins. We needed to do something about this. It started probably 20 years ago, Raul, and we're finally here. The department has attempted to do it 3 other times in history, but fortunately we put our feet down and the governor and I worked hard at it. We had to work with the legislature, which is always a challenge, but we survived that too, and we have this project and it's underway. So if you will indulge me, I'll give you a little update on this project. This is the holy grail of transportation, in my opinion, for the state of Louisiana. We've got other holy grails out there. It's called the New Mississippi River Bridge. It's called the Calcasieu River Bridge. It's called the I-49 South. It's called I-49 North. All total, those are about $5.5 billion, just those projects. But this is one that's actually under construction today, and I'm very proud of our progress. So for those of you that may not know, this project actually goes from 415 to the 10-12 split. It's a phenomenal project, and it's going to transform this region. Here are the benefits, and I like to talk about this. I can always tell you what we're doing, but I'd like you to know what you're going to get at the end of the day. First, I-10 will no longer drop to 1 lane. You all know it. I know it. It's not the way it should have been done. 4 lanes are now carried through the corridor, providing more capacity when it's finished. So right now, you've got 3 lanes, in some cases with no shoulders, which is not the safest because we kill far too many people on our roads in Louisiana. Last year, it was 3 people per day. Over the Mardi Gras weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 15 crashes, 13 deaths on our roads. That's absolutely unacceptable. We're changing that with some of these projects. The short ramps that you have right now, where your knuckles turn white when you get up on there, they're going to disappear. There you go. We're going to have wider shoulders. The southbound traffic will be physically prohibited, meaning if you're coming from 110, there will be no physical way to take the Washington Street exit. You're going to have to use the Terrace Street that we actually built much earlier on in my term as secretary. That is going to be transformative, and it's going to save lives. Smoother traffic flow on surface streets. People sometimes forget there's this concept of induced demand where they assume you build more and more people will come, and there's some truth to that. But what you're not realizing is when you had more capacity on the interstates, we're actually taking traffic off of the local streets, which is probably where you're going to have more pedestrians, which is probably where you're going to have cyclists, which is probably where you have most of your accidents, believe it or not. So we're going to allow for that capacity. In addition to building new capacity, we're going to have pedestrian and bicycle multi-use paths. That's going to connect to the Greenway. It's going to connect to the lakes over by LSU. You're going to have a much longer bridge span made of concrete and not steel. That's going to be important for the bridge over the lakes, but it's also going to be important for St. Patrick's Day and on Perkins. Think about all of that steel that makes noise and it resonates. It's going to be a little bit quieter for you and a lot more attractive under the bridge. So we made some really big announcements most recently. The first phase of this project using CMAR, which is Construction Manager at Risk. It's a new delivery model. We actually were going to stop this first segment of the project at the lakes. And we said, no, let's get across the lakes. Well, we figured out a way, working with our engineering team and our contractor, to actually reduce the capacity of time or reduce the window of time from an 8-year construction for a smaller section to about a 4-year construction. And we're going all the way to Acadian. That is huge. Time, my friends, is absolutely money. The dollar amount we're saving is about $50 million because of how we're building this segment. It's going to be a pretty impressive thing to watch. Before I give you the timeline, I think it's important for you to know, not only will we build it faster in just this first segment, Not only will we switch traffic one major time, but we're going to disrupt businesses, unfortunately, only one time. Otherwise, we'd be doing it 2 or 3 times over that cycle. So if you're in business, you want to have the certainty of what's going to happen at Perkins. You're going to want to be involved in the decision making of what it looks like under Perkins and how it's going to be managed. We can do that now as opposed to doing that much later down the road. Here's where we are on this timeline, and my eyes will deceive me, but you see at 2022, we're at our first quarter. We've actually started the construction of this project. You may not see it yet, but we have absolutely started construction. At the very beginning of 23, and I'll walk you through some other pages if I can see, because I certainly can't read that far, and I don't think you can either. So, stage 1, we will begin construction on 3 lanes in each direction. There's going to be temporary widening that's going to take place, and we'll show you some pictures in a second. There'll be temporary widening westbound on I-10. At the beginning of 2024, we will have a lane restriction. Why is that important? It's because you can't occupy 2 places at one time. And in order to build a much more desirable piece of infrastructure, we're going to completely remove and rebuild all of the eastbound section at one time. That's where you get your savings in time, that's where you get your quality, and that's where you save your money. That temporary widening we talked about is going to be necessary to put all of the traffic on the other westbound side, and you'll see a picture of that in a second. That's going to begin in 2024. In stages 3 and 4 and 5, you will have 3 lanes of traffic in each direction. And remember, that 2-lane restriction is only for a 14-month window if you can pay attention on that map. It's not a very long time, even though we're going to be in construction much longer. And you'll see a picture of that in a second. We'll be finished this project, phase 1, segment 1, in 2027. Now, you should know that the Terrace Street is already constructed. You should also know at the end of this slide, I will show you the College interchange improvement that is under construction. Knock on wood, it'll be finished this year if we have good weather and not too many hurricanes. The Acadian Street underramp, if you will, or underpass, it's actually already contracted out to KCS to go into construction. And so after 2027, you will only have the section from Acadian to College to do. That will include the Nahan Street Bridge. So this is not an opportunity to think this is a 20-year project. This is much sooner to be completed than you think. This doesn't mean those other projects I mentioned earlier are on the back shelf. It simply means this project will be done because we absolutely need to do this for the future of this state and the future of Baton Rouge. So if you can pay attention to this, this is stage 1, and the clicker isn't, there we go. This is going to be temporary widening on that stretch. The main line traffic during this process is 3 lanes eastbound, 3 lanes westbound. The next slide, this is the beginning of stage 2. This is the 10-1-10 split. This is where you will feel a pinch, and I will tell you what we're going to do to address that pinch in this process. This stretch where we go in 1 lane, all of that's got to be rebuilt. So we have to take this out to rebuild it. In order to manage that traffic, you've got 2 lanes on that stretch today. 1 lane off of the bridge is going to take you to 110. The other lane is going to take you 110 south. You have an exit lane right there that people tend to use as a passing lane. That's where our problems come in, because folks who cross from over here want to get all the way over here in a very, very short distance. So you're still going to have 1 lane in this direction going forward for that 14-month window, because the traffic is going to switch in here. 1 lane is going to come to I-110 North. 1 lane is going to take the westbound. There's shoulder space there. Engineers have modeled it and designed it. We know it works. It's just like your heart surgeon, just like your dentist. You can't tell them how to do it. You let the professionals do their jobs. The engineers have spent the last 1.5 years figuring this out. All right? That's going to be in stage 2. Here at Acadian, what's going to happen is you will see you will have 2 lanes on the west side, 2 lanes on the east side, or eastbound, I should say, all on the west side of the bridge. because all of this is being built. Everything that's in red is going to be built simultaneously in that entire corridor. That's reducing the total number of phases, it's reducing traffic, and you're going to have a much nicer piece of infrastructure. If you think about it in terms of what's happening now, 100 years from now, 50 years from now, we're dealing with the wrath of decisions that probably weren't well thought out many, many years ago when we first built the interstate. And so we're getting it right based on experienced design. After that section is finished, you will have this entire piece rebuilt, and guess what? We'll be able to put the same volume of traffic that you have today on that side. So you will have 3 lanes in each direction temporarily while we build the westbound section on that side. And that's an example of what it looks like. You're going to have 3 lanes going east, 3 lanes going west, and all of that's going to be reconstructed to match the piece that is the eastbound segment. That's stage 4. During stage 4, as I said, that's longer than you have with that 1 2-lane constriction. So you're going to be back at the level of capacity today, and then in 2027, you will have a much wider section that you can put 4 lanes with shoulders on each side in both directions. It's going to be our version of the big dig. I call it the big build because it's going to be difficult. Had we done it 25 years ago before we had 120,000 cars a day, it would have been a lot easier. We didn't do it as a state. Not pointing fingers, but we've made some bad decisions, and that was one of them by not acting sooner on this project. You'll have 4 lanes in each direction. Here's the magic of this. As this gets started, it gives us time to save money to do the Nahan Street Bridge. So you can potentially move right into the phase of designing that as soon as we make those funds available, because the contractor is going to be there and build everything on this side. The engineers are going to be there and design everything in this project from 415 to the 1012 split. So it's all comprehensively going to come together and not be piecemealed in terms of the quality or in terms of the ability to build this at pace like we need to build. So people are going to say, it's going to be crazy, it's going to be dangerous. Well, what are we doing? We've got the next 2 years to be smart about making this tough decision. We will do temporary striping and signage improvements throughout the city of Baton Rouge because we've done the mesoscopic traffic models to tell us where people will go, when they will go, what the peaks will be. And we realize that adding 15 minutes to your peak is probably not a bad thing if I'm saving you 4 years of hard construction. Those are the things the models have told us. Signal timing on alternate routes will be addressed. We don't have a very good grid here in Baton Rouge, but we know we have Florida. You know you have 61. You've got Airline. You've got Burbank, Perkins. I mean, you name it. You've got some streets. We know what's going to happen on them. So we're going to watch that very closely. We're actually advocating, and we have a plan in place, and we're working with the feds. We were with the previous president of Amtrak. We were with the current president of Amtrak. FRA, we've talked to the executives. A part of this is going to help us deliver Baton Rouge to New Orleans passenger rail. Because guess what? If I know that 65% of the people in the morning peak are coming from Ascension, and if I can put them on a train free of charge for the time of this construction, it's going to be an incentive for them not to be in traffic. They would like to not be in traffic when gas is what it is today. Think about that in terms of what other cities are doing with mobility. Their ability to move, you can move way more people on a track than you can efficiently in a car. And guess what? It'll help us achieve the climate goals that have been set forth in the state's climate action plan, because we can slowly begin to reduce congestion and reduce greenhouse gas emissions in this region. We're also advocating and working toward delivering an HOV lane on I-12, which means folks who are coming in from Walker should be able to use the shoulder. We have some work to do on that, but that's what we're working on, that we can then allow folks with 2 people or more to just come straight through on that and hopefully avoid the congestion, which is going to get you in and out of this region much more efficiently. We're looking at changes to transit. While you may not be a catch rider, there are people who don't want cars, don't have cars, don't need cars, but they're going to need transit. So how do we modified those schedules to accommodate these things that we have. The state of Louisiana, I spoke to the commissioner, I spoke to the governor, and I had a wild, crazy idea. Pre-COVID, let's think about reducing the number of hours that we come to work. So I can give you 40 hours of work a week, and I can do it in a 4-day window, which means that one day I get to stay home. We did that for almost 2 years with COVID. It is doable if we implement it right. And the logic is that we take the 8,000 employees, reduce it by 20% on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Guess what? That's fewer cars that are in that corridor in that morning peak or in that evening peak. The governor's already agreed to it. The commissioner and I have talked about it with other agencies. It's a process in motion that we will give you 4 10-hour days and ask you to stay home on that 5th day, and we'll rotate that out. Huge process. We know it can work. We're going to encourage stakeholders to offer flexible hours for their employees where they can. It makes sense for your employees. And then we're working with the trucking industry. Stephen Holliday is our multimodal commercial trucking person at the department. You've heard of that thing called Amazon? He brings a lot of boxes to my house every day. Walmart, FedEx, UPS, anyone with a fleet, we need them to avoid this corridor. We're going to be working with shippers from around the country to say, we know what this is going to be. You might want to avoid being in that footprint during these times because that's the tightest time. The other thing that you're going to see, and I didn't mention this, is the technology. We're going to be lighting up our dynamic message boards as far east as Hammond, as far west as Lafayette, advising people, take 190, go Highway 90, use those other alternatives. These little things in your phone, Google, 511, Waze, guess what? They use our data. So that will be automatically filtered to your vehicles in your cars to be able to tell you, provided you don't look at it while you're driving, you'll be able to get to where you need to get. So that's the technical stuff. That's the hard stuff. This is the stuff that people, the ooh and the ah moment of which you have. This is an example of where we're headed with the bridge over the lakes in Baton Rouge. We've done this in conjunction with the folks working on the dredging of the lakes, and in fact, we are a contributor through this project in the amount of $5 million toward the dredging of the lake that will be used to help Corey connect it from a recreational perspective with Baton Rouge Recreation. This is going to be an impressive piece of infrastructure that people will see. This is the state of Louisiana. You've got elements from the state of Louisiana's Art Deco style, and it's going to be pretty darn impressive. This, my friends, are the new sound walls. We've got acrylic sound walls that are available to you that I saw in Israel. We've seen them in other places. This is going to be one of the most attractive pieces of this bridge because we're going to have the opportunity to decide if we want to see it clearly or if we want to see it through an opaque view. And you can add art to that as well. That'll be sketched in or etched in onto this piece. And I don't think my video showed like it was supposed to. Unless, see if Perry was here, I'd fix it. Oh, there we go. So this next slide, if it shows, you'll get a drive-through on some of the acrylic elements of what this means. So as you look at this, think about the value of this. This gives you a different feeling when you drive through this community. The aesthetic elements that you're going to see are going to deter, I think, graffiti and create a new element of ownership in your community. It's going to make it a lot less stressful place to drive through. While we've not seen these before in Louisiana, we know they work. The turning point for the Department of Transportation, I think, is happening on this project, I-49 North, I-49 South, where we're building and designing things to add value to a community as opposed to subtract that value. Art is a phenomenal piece of that. The aesthetics of what you do is a phenomenal piece of that. Adding color. We have a color on the palette, it's called Louisiana Gray. If you've seen a bridge, you've seen Louisiana Gray. It's a very drab Louisiana Gray. But we can, oh, that was my song. We can do all kinds of things to tell people we love this state, we love this community, and what we do with our infrastructure is a part of that. So, I won't let that keep going because it's about a 3-minute video. I think this is on our website at i10br.com. you'll be able to click through that video for the noise walls. It actually carries the designs that are on the very traditional walls that you see. Little bit about college. I told you it was on its way to be finished. We issued a notice to proceed in 2020. It's a $52 million project. It's all using Garvey bonds, and the Garvey bonds are not going to break us because we wisely did something different with this. We only sold bonds for a 13-year window as opposed to a 30-year window. When you do a 30-year bond, people are more likely to renew those bonds without necessarily delivering the entire project. And guess what? You're going to have to redo the road before you pay the bonds off. These projects are going to be done, and I will be able to recycle those bonds for the next phase of this project, and it's only eligible for transportation dollars. The time bonds that you paid for in 1990, they'll be paid for in 2045, and that was a 30-year bond. If you do the math, you've doubled the cost, you've doubled the time. Not good policy. We've done it right this time. So the college piece is well on its way. This is what it's going to look like at the very end of that process. I'm proud to tell you that for every tree we removed, we worked with Baton Rouge Green. A bunch of them were not going to survive because they've learned a lot about overplanting and choosing what you plant. So for every tree we removed, we're actually going to replace it with 2 trees. And we've given Baton Rouge Green the opportunity to do it anywhere in the corridor. So we're going to make a much nicer footprint by the time we're finished, and weather compliant will be finished in 2022. And so this slide is where I'm going to end and then take a few questions. This is one of the dynamic pieces of infrastructure. It's called working really smart. We put a camera out there and we watch these people move a huge part of this bridge out overnight. It's an accelerated way of doing it. These are things that we can do in the state of Louisiana with the intellect and knowledge that we have. The material and equipment is there, and you see us pull all this out. We did another bridge segment over on I-49 this past weekend. We have the capacity to do really, really cool things. And I am excited to get to the end of my presentation and then let you ask me some questions. Yes, sir.
Can you talk for a minute about the Hermes Road overpass area, the businesses underneath there? I think everybody agrees that what's going to come out in the wash is going to be a much better situation than it is now.
Yep.
But if you got a business and you don't make it through that because your patrons can't get to your restaurant or something like that, you don't get to enjoy it. So can you talk a little bit about how you're going to alleviate that stress on those businesses?
Certainly. So we're limited with funds, so we can't just pick up all those businesses and move them. There's going to be one window for about 14 months where businesses will be impacted. And the details of that are being worked out. When I say the details, the timing, the specifics of when we need to be in a certain area, because all of those businesses are currently using the state's right-of-way to park. They're currently using the facility where we need to go back and build, and what's under there really isn't that impressive in terms of the paving or the potholes or the downspouts that don't work, the poor lighting, the Louisiana gray color. And so what we're looking at in terms of what we do is providing shuttle service for those times when we're not there so that businesses can continue to have clients only until those moments where it's absolutely not safe because we may be above their business. We're looking at other efforts to communicate to the public that they're there. But more importantly, the most important thing we can do is listen to the businesses to tell us what they need and what they want. Very few businesses are being totally relocated or moved. Very few pieces of property are being acquired. 95% of this is within the existing state's right-of-way. And so we have all kinds of things at our disposal, from technology to communication strategies, to the ability to use some of these resources to help manage some of those opportunities. For example, if you're going to be closing your business over a weekend, I can't fairly ask you to do that without some sense of compensation or some sense of impact or value exchanged. We don't know what that is for every business just yet, but the contractors are very cognizant of that and are going to work toward mitigating that with what they tell us. And so we're going to continue to have those conversations. If you don't know, Perry Franklin is a big part of that communication strategy. So since he's in your club, inundate him with questions and comments. I know he's not here right now, keeping him and his family in prayers, but when he comes back, he's got to get to work. But we've got some really, really good ideas that we've heard from the community and those businesses. One of the biggest things I think we did for the businesses was guarantee them one disruption. because if we didn't do this, we'd have to come back and do it a second time in that footprint, and we wouldn't want to do that and hurt them more than once. Yes?
You may have heard of a gentleman named Coleman Brown in your.
I don't think I've heard of Coleman. Yeah, I do know Coleman.
Could you, following the four-way test principles,
Absolutely.
comment on
Absolutely.
some of Coleman's suggestions that would have cut billions of dollars and years off of this project?
So have a lot of respect for Coleman. Coleman spent time with me very early in my administration, and together we worked on this concept of the terrace street for different reasons. He saw it as a way to prevent the crossover. I saw it as a way to address an environmental justice issue that we would have had to address had we continued this environmental document without Washington Street. So it was a massive tool for us to get environmental clearance, and we creatively funded that and got it started and opened in about a 3-year window, which is unheard of. So we've got innovation. What you don't hear from Coleman is the fact that his suggestion is only addressing certain pieces of the infrastructure. You take the Perkins Road on-ramp. He wanted to just extend that. That's good, but guess what? That on-ramp is 64 years old, and it's at the end of its useful life. Why would I extend something that I know I will need to replace in another 10 or 15 years? He discounted the idea that the entire stretch is original pavement that Eisenhower built. So it's not just there. The bridge structures are at the end of their useful life. I can put you in construction doing some little stuff for a few years, and guess what? In another 10 years, I got to come back and do it again. And then there's a hinge pin, because if I spend federal money today, I got to get my utility out of that money. So I wouldn't have money to come back and fix it after I've mended it, if you will. The idea of 23 years, what he looked at was an agreement, which is a part of an environmental process that said, if I did business as usual, how long would it take? Given my money, given my time and capacity, it could take, in terms of the historic elements, 23 years is what we said that would be. But that was before we had final legislative approval that gave me the $350+ million to build this first segment. That was before we went through the CMAR process to see that I can get much further. And that is before we had any numeric around construction time. And so now that we know that, to build that entire stretch from the bridge or the 10-110 merge that you saw all the way to the other side of Acadian, I'm doing it in 4 years. That's not what that report said, but it's being taken out of context. He's also suggesting that we had some obligations to get far, far outside of our right-of-way, meaning 2 blocks off, because problems and homes are going to be demolished or challenged or damaged with construction. Whenever we do it, those types of things happen. But guess what? Our industry's smart enough to go out and put sensors and do assessments and measure, and we have ways of addressing that. So from what I know, there's some ideas. I wouldn't call them the best ideas. I wouldn't call them the ideas that are consistent with what we do in government, what we do in transportation. This is a very complex game, particularly from money, from federal regulation, from construction requirements and law, as well as dealing with 120,000 cars a day. And so the idea that I can just stop working on the interstate to move all those cars to Florida, it doesn't make sense. And so to that I say, we are the experts. Not that we're perfect, not that we don't make mistakes, but we study and do this for a living all across the state of Louisiana. And I think we've done a pretty darn good job with it thus far. Yes?
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Nahan Bridge?
Nahan Street Bridge. Nahan Street Bridge is the bridge that crosses the interstate. You can't access it. The Nahan Street Bridge will be rebuilt, and we're going to have to move the sound walls back. And so that's really that one segment that's going to have to be done. We didn't do it first because we started over on College. We're doing Acadian. We're coming through, I guess it would be south, if you will, on the interstate to go eastbound first. So we will eventually get to Nahan. That's going to be the next phase once we get past the Acadian phase. The benefit that you should know is that the contractors or the engineers working on this, they don't have to stop because they are contracted to do the design for the entire piece. So it could be in 3 years that we have the design ready to go for Nahan Street, and I'm just waiting on an additional $45 million. I could find $45 million next year and then put it on that project, and guess what? It'll be done probably before you finish this segment, because you've got James Construction, Bow Construction, and Kiewit, some very dynamic contractors, and a host of other subs. All of them can do heavy civil. They're working on that college interchange improvement today. So that's that part of Nahan Street that has to be done. Sound walls will be moved. I will also tell you, for those of you that may live in Bocage, one of the biggest concerns of the flyover, while we said flyover, we knew Design Build was going to bring in innovation because it was going to elevate that flyover because it needed to be rebuilt, or the bridge needed to be rebuilt. The new standards would have brought it higher and closer to the wall, would have made noise, and guess what? Using the innovative process that my friend didn't always think about, we're not going closer to that wall. We're actually coming further away from the wall. And you're not having to go up. We're staying at grade. So we're being innovative in this space, and I think the same thing can happen with Nahan and that segment of college that you're going to see when that bridge gets rebuilt.
So is the 4 lanes of traffic, will it be the future for 50 years as this bridge has been there? I mean, all this development you said since Eisenhower, is 4 lanes enough?
4 lanes is enough, because much like what the question was, is the 4 lanes enough? The reality is, if we didn't build this 4 lanes, you'd be in worse log jam in the next 5 or 10 years. Will it be enough forever? Absolutely not, but that's why we're looking at building and advancing a new Mississippi River Bridge. That's why you have to look at an entire community and not just a project. The reality is, if I got any wider, we would change the face of Baton Rouge. And that's not what we want to do. The beauty of this project is 95% of the right-of-way was already owned by us. I'm not interested in getting into neighborhoods and communities. I don't like acquiring property. I do a lot of it. I don't like it. I don't think it's the right transportation decision, because I think when you look at how people live and exist, I don't think the car is always going to be there. And so I think 4 lanes is a maximum amount for what's in that corridor, provided we continue our efforts on the bridge, provided we fix LA1, provided we do some other things like access management, controlling some of the medians, of which we're going to do in this project along airline so it can flow a lot better. But acquiring property is not the answer, and it's very, very expensive. I will tell you, what we're going to build is going to have a utility or a life much longer than what was already there. So this is going to be a 100-year construction. It's going to last a while. And that's a good thing. That's because of materials. It's because of design standards. It's because of how we protect and maintain it. All of those things contribute to the life cycle of this infrastructure a lot more than what was done previously. Let me go right here and then right here.
Will the city's traffic light synchronization project be completed by the time some of these major disruptions along the interstate?
I have Fred Rayford's number if you'd like it. So, we work hand in hand with the city, in all seriousness. Traffic signals, people always say, just get them all to go green at one time and you'd have chaos. It doesn't work that way. So, will the synchronization have taken place for all of the lights under the Baton Rouge program? I can't answer that. Are we looking at those corridors where we know people are going to be moving to during construction? Absolutely. We're taking those steps. And I mentioned it. So 61, airline, there are crossover medians there. Some of them are going to have to close. Some of these intersections are going to have a left turn lane so people can get out of the way and then be able to move through. Some of them are going to have different timing set on them so that we can provide the majority of the green to a different corridor because the volumes are different. So we work hand in hand with them. We share traffic information. We share knowledge, and we're going to do the best we can to make sure that we take advantage of technology. Last question, and after this last question, I typically stick around a few minutes if those of you who didn't get your burning questions, unless you work at DOTD, you can catch me at the office. Yes, question.
So does this project work long-term if we don't get another Mississippi River Bridge? And if it doesn't, how long till we reach capacity?
Yes to that question of does it help us if we never get the Mississippi River Bridge, because what we have today is untenable from a maintenance perspective. If we had to just wait for something to go wrong, I don't want to be Minnesota. I don't want to be like some of the secretaries where pieces of structures fall down and people die or get hurt. And so the cost of maintaining something in that condition is far more expensive to the quality of life we have than the money we're going to spend, in my opinion, to build it so I don't have to maintain it. I'm not proud of the way it looks today. You go out there and see downspouts that don't work. I saw an issue today. I'm talking to my chief engineer on a part we just did. So we've got to do a better job at how we maintain. The future plans, when we design and build roads, we look at a 30 to 45 year window. I think people are smart. They find the path of least resistance, and if it gets to be too congested, they're going to go somewhere else. We've seen that happen with businesses here in Louisiana that want to expand, but because we hadn't made the first step toward real infrastructure improvement, they go elsewhere. Because we haven't made the real step toward the Mississippi River Bridge, Dow has said, I can't ask for new expansions at Dow if you don't spend any money to get my people here more efficiently. That's why the governor asked to put $500 million cash on that project to demonstrate a real commitment to these mega projects, because we've never done mega projects like we should. We've bonded out money for mega projects, but they gave me more project than money. This time we're being smart. And I'll do this last plug, and then the president's going to make me sit down, but I'll have to answer questions. Please pay attention to the legislature as we spend money, because in the infrastructure bill, there's about $1 billion coming to Louisiana where we're going to spend about $500 million on bridges, or 500 bridges will get done over the next 5 years. Huge investments coming, but we have to be smart. We cannot afford to waste money or squirrel money when we can actually spend money that's going to repay us over time. We've never, ever had, since Katrina, I think, the wealth that we have right now. And it's important for us to invest in these big projects, because we've never, ever invested in these big projects. And guess what? I-49 South, Lake Charles Bridge, New Mississippi River Bridge, I-49 North, they all were here in Katrina. And here we are 15 years later and haven't moved the needle. So when you've got $1 billion, much like you're going to do if you get a little windfall and you need a new roof, you're going to save it and do that roof next year. That's what the governor's asking us to do. That's what I'm asking us to do, is for once, instead of dividing this money up in 64 ways and giving every little parish something and look back and say, man, where'd that money go? Spend it where it matters most. And we'll talk about it, but we'll be the bureaucrats, we'll be that governor's administration, but you are citizens. If you think that resonates, say something. If you don't, that's okay. But understand the impact of infrastructure and what we do, because this is economic development. This is how you create jobs. This is how we keep our grandchildren here, by investing in ourselves. And I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and I'd love to come back one day, and if I stay any longer, I won't. But I'll be here to answer a few questions throughout the day.